All the children come forward if there's anybody else in the back. You know why I call you to come to sit in the front? Oh, we can answer my questions. That's good. But why else do I ask the children to come forward to the sit in the front instead of telling them go sit in the back seat? Thank you. So you can hear me and you can see me. So that I can see you and I can hear you, and we can have communion with each other. You know what communion with each other is? When we talk and we listen to each other, we talk to each other, and we have relationship. So what's the reason that you wouldn't hear and see me if you were sitting in the back? Too far away? And what's the other reason? Because we're short, right? Kids are short. So today there was another guy who was very short. He was probably your height, although he was grown up, and his name was Zackeas. So Zackeas was short, and he didn't have very good friends. What is a good friend? A good friend is the one who makes things possible for you. And he did not have good friends, so when he wanted to see Jesus, Catherine has a question. Yeah? Thank you. Catherine said, friends are people who are good for you. That's very good. So Zaccheus didn't have good people who were good for him. And so when he wanted to see Jesus, what did they tell him? Do you remember from the gospel? They told him, go to the back of the aisle, because you are not a good person, we don't like you, and you're short anyways. So go into the back and don't see Jesus. And Zacchaeus did not give up. What did he do? He climbed a tree. He climbed a tree because he didn't have friends. He found a tree. Okay? If he had friends, his friends would make room for him so he could come forward and see Jesus. But because he didn't have friends, he went to the tree and said, tree, can I climb you? And the tree said, go ahead, jump. So Zacchaeus climbed. You know who was Zacchaeus? He was like a tax collector. He was like an IRS manager, right? Can you imagine if you go down the street and you see manager of the IRS on a tree? You couldn't imagine that, right? But this guy was so humble. He wanted to see Jesus so much that he didn't care what people would think about him. Would you climb a tree if Jesus was coming your way? Yes. What does it mean? It means that it doesn't matter what it takes. You'd make all the efforts to get closer to Jesus. And that's what you did. You were sitting in the back and you made all the effort through the crowd and you crawled and came to the front. No? Yes? No, the aisles are open. You can come easily to the front, right? So that's what Zacchaeus did. He climbed a tree and he waited and waited and waited until Jesus came. Zacchaeus was also a very smart guy. He was short, but all he was a brain, like a lot of brain. So he actually studied very, very closely and find out how Jesus was going to travel. Like imagine Jesus was going to travel on the Central Street and you climbed a tree that was on Somerville Avenue. Would you see him? No. So you needed to know where Jesus is. Where is Jesus? He's on Central Street, right? 29 Central Street. That's where you find Jesus, not on Somerville Avenue. So that's where you go, not some random place. And that's what Zacchaeus did. He climbed a tree that was exactly where Jesus' route was going to go. And Jesus came and he stood next to the tree and said, what did he say? Zacchaeus, go even further? Go up? No.
Zacchaeus, come down.
Zacchaeus, come down. Why?
Come to your house.
So that I can come into your house. Do you know that everybody, all the crowd was standing there? They were shocked. Why were they shocked? Because he was a bad guy. He was a tax collector. But bad guy according to who?
Bad guy according to the silly.
According to us, according to people. But people cannot really judge. Can you look back and say, tell me who is a bad guy in there? In the crowd?
Nobody is.
Nobody is, right? So we love everybody. We don't call anybody bad guy, right? Or a bad woman. We don't call, because sometimes, or most of the time, and I would say all the time, when we call somebody a bad person, we are actually wrong, badly wrong. And in this case, Jesus actually did exactly that. He did many times. He told his friends and the Pharisees and the tax collectors and everybody that what they were thinking is wrong. Like one day somebody came, a woman, and he had a very expensive oil, and she brought and poured it on Jesus' head, and then she washed his feet with her tears. And what did one of his friends say? Oh, what a waste! That oil, we could have made some French fries with it. No, not French fries. He said we could have sold it and give it to the poor. It was a great thing to do, right? But Jesus said, you're wrong. She's right. And another time, a leper came because everybody had told the lepers, you can't come close to Jesus, you can't come close to him. But they came and touched him, and they came and asked him to heal them. And another time, he found somebody who people were stoning. They had stone in their hands, and they were trying to kill her. And Jesus came and said, stop. Anybody who has no sin, let them throw the first stone. And you know what happened? What happened? What do you think? Nobody dared to throw any stones, because he, Jesus, had also taken a little stick, and with that stick he was writing the sins of the people on the ground, on the dust. And people were reading their sins, and they were dropping their stones and leaving. So what's the problem? The problem is that today people do bad things, and we don't know that their sins, or they have sins, or they don't. And another time, I'm going to tell you the last two examples. When a blind man wanted to see Jesus, what did people say to him? Bartimaeus, keep your mouth shut and sit down and don't bother Jesus. What did Jesus do? He stopped. He turned around and said, Bartimaeus, what can I do for you? And Bartimaeus threw his dirty clothes off of him, and he ran and asked Jesus, please, if you can, make my eyes open. And Jesus said, according to your faith, because you trusted me, you are greater than anybody else, your eyes will be opened. So the last one is when people brought their children to Jesus. His friends, his disciples, the apostles. We have their icons over there, right? They were wrong too. What did they say? What do you think? They said, take your kids away. You're bothering Jesus. You think Jesus get bothered by children? No.
We would not be sitting here if
No, we wouldn't be sitting here if he was being bothered by us, right? And he brought them over to him, and he actually took one little baby child and put on his knee and blessed the child and said to his disciples, if you don't become like these children, you will not go into heaven. That's scary, right? They were telling, take the kids away, and Jesus is saying, you need to become like them. In other words, they're better than you. Okay? So that's what it means that we are always wrong. Always wrong when we judge other people. Because we see other people's sins, it's very easy, but we don't see ours. Ours is hidden, is in our heart. It's in the chest, and there's a bunch of locks on it, and we don't open it ever. And the other people's sins are obvious. We can see them doing all kinds of stupid and wrong things, and we immediately attack them and say, you are wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. And even worse, what people did to Zackeas, we do sometimes to people who are not good according to us, and we don't allow them to go to church or receive communion or get closer to Christ because they are not good. But we should do what? The opposite, right? Whoever is the worst person in the world, we should invite them to church. We should invite them to sit in the front pew. We should invite them to receive communion so that they can be transformed. You know what the word transform means? What does it mean? Change. It means change. So change is important. Anyone who doesn't change is dead. So if we're alive, we're changing. Dear brothers and sisters, I already talked in an extensive way about Zackeas. Zackeas is one of the most important characters in the New Testament, presenting every single one of us. He represents every single one of us, because we all are in search of God in our hearts. We are all looking for God. And like the crowd that was preventing Zaccheus to see Christ, there is all kinds of obstacles for each and every one of us to see Christ. Most difficult problem, most difficult obstacle to overcome sometimes is shame. Shame is something that keeps us away from our friends and from God. That is very beautifully depicted in the story of the prodigal son. The prodigal son was eating with the pigs. He was most unworthy to draw near, to come closer to God. But he decided at one point that I have to go back to my father, with a conclusion that he had made. I will go to my father, he said, and I will tell him, Father, I have sinned against you and against heaven. Please accept me back as one of your servants. Zacchaeus is kind of in that same place. He's a tax collector, most hated person in Israel, because not only he collected taxes, but the taxes did not go to the Israel's government, but they went to the government of Rome, the enemy. He was squeezing the blood of his own people for the enemy. So everyone hated him. And I am sure that had created a lot of shame for him. That's why he couldn't ask anyone to open up space for him to look at Christ. But he had to go and find a lonely tree, climb a tree so that nobody can see him, and observe Christ passing by, not to talk to him, but just to see him pass by. And that's what Christ noticed. He came to the tree and saw the diligence and the overcoming of the obstacles to a point where he climbed the tree and asked him to come down to have communion with him. And he said, I will come to your house because salvation came to your house today because of your efforts. Dear brothers and sisters, when I talk about the prodigal son, I always imagine how hard would it have been for the prodigal son to come back. Yes, he made a decision to come. But when he started to walk, he probably noticed that his clothes were filthy. He smelled like pigs. And he's going to go into his father's house and represent him like that. And the second thing, that the road sometimes is very long. For me to overcome what kept me away from being in full communion with God took over 10 years. And every time I made one more step to get closer to Him and to be in a place where I wanted to be. Like the prodigal son, it is very difficult. With every step, you look at the distance, how far your father is, and you say, it's not worth it. Let me go backwards because that is shorter. Until you get closer and closer, and as they say, you can see the light on the other side of the tunnel. And then you can start walking faster. And hopefully it's not a train coming from the other side. Sometimes that happens too. As you're walking, you get run over by a bus or a train. But you still have to get up, pick yourself up and walk. A Russian saint once said, walking towards God is not from victory to victory, it's from failure to failure. The difference is that when we fall, we shouldn't sit and cry over our failure, but we should pick up ourselves and continue walking. Maybe even cry, but walk too. So Zacchaeus did exactly that. And that is a lesson for every single one of us. Why? Because Christ calls him son of Abraham. And we are the adopted children of Abraham through our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter how sinful people are out in the world, they are also adopted children of Abraham, or people waiting for adoption. When there are children waiting for parents to adopt them, we take very good care of them until someone is found to take them into the safety of their home. People out in the world are hungry, thirsty, naked, poor, waiting for adoption. And we are those brothers and sisters who are in the house of the Father, who are to embrace all those who make their way up the hill to 29 Central Street. But, like the second son, the brother of the prodigal son, sometimes we feel uncomfortable when prodigal children walk into the territory that is comfortable for us, the territory that we have made pleasant for us, that we click together, we work together well, we don't want anybody to come and disturb it. Like the second son said to the father, I was always here, you never took care of me, and all of a sudden this son of yours came back and you have a party. Dear brothers and sisters, Christ says every saved soul is a cause for the angels to rejoice in heaven. It is very difficult to be in the house. It's very difficult to be the second son because you do what you're supposed to do. And those are not my words. Christ said, when you come to heaven, I will tell you, good servant, you did what you were supposed to do. He's not going to praise us and say, Joe, this and that, great job, you did more than you were supposed to do. Go stand higher over there. He's going to say, stand on my right, you did what you were supposed to do because you're my son. Everything that I had was also yours. Being in the house, we are already blessed. We're already rejoicing and taking the blessings of God, unlike those who are on the way to the home, and we are like the Father, not sit here and wait for them to come, because they may come to the door and be too shy, to be ashamed to enter. We are to go down to the Somerville Avenue and meet them there and bring them up to the house of God. I had planned to bring a stack of papers with me today, a perfectly stacked paper that we get for the computers, for the printers. In order to put 500 pages in that perfect form, it takes at least half an hour for one person. If you take those stack of paper and you throw, in 1 second you can create a chaos. If you wanted to go and collect all those papers and put them again in the same organized way, you may not even be able to put it in the way that it was, because it was a machine cut and perfect. So dear brothers and sisters, to bring one lost soul from the streets into the church takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. To lose one soul, it takes one ignorant word, and that person is lost. And when you lose someone, it takes 10 times longer time to bring them back. To bring someone back fresh is easier than to bring someone who was already here and we lost them. Today, let Zackeas be an example for us, that we become the community that embraces people who come short in their life. May God bless you.